We good to go? Okay. It is now a minute after, so we'll go ahead and commence. I want to thank, hold on, before we start. Get to the right screen. There we go. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank you for being here at the conference. Excellent time here, and thank you for being in this room. My name is Andrew Welchel from Savient. We're going to be focusing in on AI and identity together. I'm sure you'll hear about AI within some other contexts at the conference. But specifically today, we're going to talk about these things. You might hear me use the term sword and shield. We'll kind of describe what that means in a minute. So our agenda today is we're going to talk a little bit of explanation of our challenges and use case. We're going to talk about a few ways to tackle this, to understand it, and time permitting, we'll have a little demo at the end and some time for questions. Now, if you haven't figured out, there's lots of identities out there, and this isn't even getting to some of the OT and that type thing. And what we're also finding is these identities are certainly talking to others. And you kind of got two classes, really, of them that are out there. If you look at the top, you're really talking about like people, persons, contractors, even externals. And then on the right, you kind of got some operational OT. But one thing that we're seeing as a pattern is within the bottom sections, these are prime for having some automation, specifically some AI automation. So things like job automation, things like digital twinning, account automation, and workloads, these types of things. These are the cases where a lot of times we may have been doing things manually, and there's certainly some great tools that can do this. But there are some challenges, right? And as we'll see here in a few minutes, there's some kind of challenges that connect to the mission. Now, if I flip this out a little bit farther, certainly in the commercial space and even on the kind of federal and defense enterprise space, it is very true that those things are all applicable, but it's not just there. It's really kind of across the AORs. We're really focused on kind of that south or that kind of rather bottom right-hand corner. But as I've heard a few times even this week, is really distance is the enemy, and whatever difficulty we may have found sometimes with AI and identity management, when you're on the continental space, it's even harder as you go farther out as well, right? It only gets more difficult. Now, to kind of make things a little more real and interesting, one thing I'll sometimes do is try to put this into a vignette format to kind of understand the challenges that we're dealing with. Happy birthday to some of the other services we've already had earlier in this year. Army and Navy, and certainly there's a big birthday for the Marine Corps coming up. So in this case, we're kind of looking at a Marine Corps kind of based use case to think about what is the user experience as they attempt to do the mission with regards to identity and AI. And in this particular case, you have a particular Marine that's coming on board. They're going to be starting an operational exercise. We're calling it Alpha Gamma. This particular Marine, he's joining to a VMM squadron as part of an FON, a freedom of navigation deployment. I'm sure most people are familiar with that. It's just basically making sure that we can navigate to the spaces we're supposed to navigate. But as he joins the squadron, he's going to need access to applications that he's going to be physically, as a carbon-based entity, going to be working with and accessing. These will be AI-enabled applications, but he's going to need access to those to get to them quickly. The second thing I'll kind of jump down to the bottom is, in addition to those, he's going to have applications that are truly AI applications. They may be weather-related. They may be some planning applications, some common operating picture, but very much in the case of, to the extent that there's some way that some identity can assist in those, that should be very interesting. Now, to move up to the last one is unavoidable, right, in this scenario. And this is kind of the concept of being able to support all these applications. And this is a little bit different than if you were just supporting this at, say, Army headquarters or Navy headquarters or, a Marine at Quantico. This is going to have to be supported if you go into MCON. So if connections are cut, the applications still need to be running. And the identity use case If you need application or you need access to an application, you're still going to need to make that request, get it approved, get it out there, make the update. So all those things still need to happen. Now these are all the challenges. This is what you need to be able to support. The next question is really, what are the requirements that we need to state in order to really transfer that? So the first one, we kind of organize this around some operational requirements, some technical, and on that aspect. Now the operational ones are kind of a little bit broader, but still very applicable. These are really to operate with scale, and then also operate for a be able to operate when you go into electronic protection scenarios. So when you go to those scenarios, you may momentarily lose connection, and you still need to operate and support it. Really, those two middle ones are the core from the technology aspect that we're kind of thinking of. And the first one is if the individual is coming on board, and they're going to whatever solution we're going to be looking at, it's going to be able to provide ICAM or specifically governance and authorization access to the applications. And when we're talking about an AI application, a lot of times we're talking about non-person entities. I give an example of service principals in the Azure environment. But in addition to that, on the immediate right of that technology piece is all this has to happen while in continuation of you get in a scenario with that with EPMCon. So if you get into those spaces, you have a scenario where if you're on the Fleet Marine Force, very common scenario is you may just have to do refueling, right? And so a lot of times that may be a case where you have an income situation, everything still needs to get running for an access request mechanism, and everything has to keep running. The bottom two are not really technical as much as it is to continue to be aware of is first technical requirements is to make sure you've got field serviceability by remote personnel. You don't want to have to phone home for small things. And then certainly power and adaptability are important. You want to plan for this as a big data center, but really be efficient in those resources. So we've got an idea as to what the challenge user experience is. This kind of defines some of the requirements. So really the next question is what are those capabilities going to have to look like? So the first element, before you get too far into the capabilities, to kind of understand one key element, which is if I have you walk away with two big concepts. The first is we're at booth 730. I'll tell you that a little later as well. But the second is if you walk away with one other thing is there's this concept of AI for identity security and then identity security for AI. And let me go back one. As a little bit kind of slightly deeper understanding, what we're talking about that is for the AI for identity security. This is a concept of answering the question, can we take the machine learning, can we take some agentic AI concepts and put that onto our identity security platform specifically so that we can manage access to applications, et cetera, so that when it comes time to make decisions, we can shorten that decision time. Because the less time you can spend making those decisions, that's more time you can spend on the mission specifically. So on this, we can have certain outcomes such as we can accelerate the identity decisions. Do you approve it? Do you not approve it? Also, about spending less time having to decide, do you actually take away access? Because that's going to be very compelling. The second scenario that's really applicable here, that's kind of understand the differences, is how do you take identity security and apply that for AI? And that's really the sword aspect of this, right? And this is really the concept of answering the question, if you could take an identity security platform and then apply it to an AI, what would that outcome look like, right? So what would it look like if you had certain capabilities, on the ship or forward deployed, and you had that, you were able to accelerate your capability to onboard mission systems, able to accelerate doing exercise, deployment, and pulling back, et cetera. So certainly can be compelling from that aspect. Now, if we look back, we've got those two options. One of the first things we look at as an example of the AI for identity security is maybe answering the question of what does it look like if you're able to answer questions such as if you can take away access more quickly, if you can make recommendations for who should have access. So in this particular case, we give an example of, you can see save in the middle there, But this is really kind of answer a question of what should you have a capability for. So this is a capability that you should really have the ability for, which would answer questions such as, if you take all these things on the left, you do some machine learning processing. Generally, this is going like k-means clustering methodology, and then let that turn into output for certifications verifying whether you should or shouldn't have access. Also, one of the challenges that exists out there is things like roles and are there too many roles? Can you consolidate roles for access? So that can be making life a lot easier as well. Now, one of the more exciting spaces, certainly the stuff that I talked about a second ago, can have a real impact on the mission and how you can do things. But one of the more exciting spaces, and I think this has a lot of impact, especially in distributed and DDIL type environments, is answering this question of if you've never seen an application before, maybe it's an LDAP-based application, maybe it's a tax server, maybe it's something else. If you've never seen it before, how can you shorten that time frame to get it onboarded? So if you know that in order to get, you've got a goal, if you have a 2-week exercise to get deployed and get the applications up and get all the users ready by X amount of time, how can you decrease the amount of time it takes to spend on the IT components to get ready? So this is one of these key things that if you could essentially use agentic AI, and basically sometimes these terms can get confusing if you're new to them. Essentially the agentic AI is a little bit different, is in that it's basically using some agents to talk to other machines. And so in this particular case, we're essentially enabling a machine to talk to other systems to consume the data, and then based on that consumption, make automatic recommendations for what the configuration could be. So it's almost like a wizard in that aspect. If you think of like a Windows, I think kind of like the old version of the printer, the way it used to be. It used to be you had to hard code stuff, but nowadays you simply plug it in and it finds it. Right, so it's going to be very much in that sense from a capability. Now, the very last one on the outside is another form to do this, but there's a lot of potential within the DDIL environment here as well, because that last one on the right-hand side is really about being able to take a template of code, essentially, and have it on a box. So as soon as you bring it up, it loads everything, and it's able to just start working. Right, so if you know what the elements are, what the expectations are, you can actually have everything preloaded in a box ready to go. So now if we stop and think where we've come so far, so we talked and understood the challenges, we talked kind of understand where that works in the vignette, and we talked about half of what this question was. So that first half was about how do you do AI for identity security? How do you make sure you can inject those capabilities? The second part to this is how do you take in identity security and enable you to fulfill the AI mission. So in that particular case, we're taking Azure as an example, Azure AI. We're then taking understanding it within Azure AI, there are what's these things called service principals, SPNs, and then within the SPNs, it's great if everything is working wonderfully, right? But that's not always the case, right? So there are, and even if it is the case now, there's always a case you want to manage risk, right? And if the other perspective I have on it is if we're not managing and looking to manage these MPEs, I can bet you that some other entity probably that has less, happy outcomes will want to do it for us, right? So in this example, if we're looking at the risks that are out there to these MPEs, if you're not managing it correctly, it certainly can be almost like a denial of service, where someone could eject and overwrite levels of access so your AI system just stops working. There's certainly cases where you could pull out data or extract data if someone messes with the access that's stated there. And the very last one is one of the more scary ones, and this was an example that brought up about it a year and a half or 2 years ago on there's an issue that came up with some of the Microsoft. And to be honest, it wasn't really Microsoft as much as it was people weren't fully aware of the impact of configuring these SPNs. But what was happening was some of the SPNs weren't configured to the level of authorization they needed to be, and people and some of the entities were showing how they could actually go in and create a new SPN, and based off that SPN, they could give themselves additional permissions and then actually do SSO inside the system. So all that is obviously not good. So if you're looking at capabilities, First of all, obviously we want to have AI in your identity security system, but then this is another capability. You want to also have identity security in your AI mission as well. Now you may be wondering, how do you actually address this, like technically? In many ways, it's kind of like how you might address a governance system to begin with. All we're doing is we're recapturing the same basic elements and just refitting it to the environment that AI is in. So in the AI environment, the reality is they're dealing with basically different kinds of access. So we're dealing with permissions typically instead of groups and those types of things. So we just capture that. We have a life cycle to which we can understand where those MPEs are, and we have certain ways to support that from a preventative and detective controls as you go through it. Now, this is the last slide before I hit onto a demo really quick. And so this is just kind of giving a snapshot of what it looks like from if you kind of put the entire stack and look at it, what it looks like to get deployed. So if you look at the kind of stack on the left, what's important is you can use the same system to manage both of those use cases. AI for identity security use case and the identity security for AI use case. You got the AI models in the bottom, you got the MBU field apps on the the top AI MBU field apps on the bottom for access. And then all these can be dropped into an Azure Stack device. There's certainly other possibilities if you have other hardware specs that you want to look at. And then certainly these can all then be connected to Entra for synchronization in this whole process. Once you have it working, then you can, as you can imagine, you can simply then take it to whatever platform you need to at that point, whether it be ground, whether it be sea, or even the air as well. Now I got quick time for a demo. Stand by. Here we go. Now what we're watching here is a user is doing that second use case, identity security for AI. And remember, in this use case, what we're looking at is how can you secure those non-person entities that are going to have access to your AI system. So in this particular case right now, we're doing a preventative control. We're basically implementing and defining proactively what levels of access this MP is going to have. And then so you can see we have a form, we're requesting it, and then we're going ahead and give it a name. As you can make a guess, you can certainly have policies to define the names exactly as you want to. So these names will be the ones that will show up on their Azure system as it gets created, or Entra ID. And then, but once you define the name, you're going to give it you want to give it an account type, an owner type. And then as you add the owner type, then we're going to add a user, right? And that user is important because that's going to be capabilities for succession. And that user is also important from responsibility, right? And from a governance and visibility perspective. So now we have the owner set. We're going to confirm it. You can see we got the name right there, and that's confirmed. And then as we go down here, this is really the meat of it, meaning that this is where we're going to actually select the actual permissions. So you heard me talk about permissions versus groups and other entitlements. So many times, because these agents are working and talking to other agents or other hardware systems autonomously, we're really talking about what does this have permission to do independently of us talking to it. And so in this particular case, we're going to pick two different permissions. We're going to select the read directory all, and then there's a second one with reporting, or I think reporting and analytics. Now what's key and important about it is we're being very selective on this, right? If you look at the types of that vulnerability scenario that I talked about before, the reason that even occurred is because that MPE had too much access. It had the ability to not only give more access, but to even create additional MPEs. That's what you don't want. So in this particular case, we're actually getting now to the list. We made the request to go to this screen, and this is doing a review. You can actually see the thumbs up and thumbs down. So we're actually overlaying both the AI for identity security and the identity security for AI in this instance, because we're actually getting kind of an AI output that's telling us the likelihood that this will get approved in this case. Now, that doesn't stop us from submitting it. We went ahead and submitted it. Now, as I press the button and we're continuing to talk here, that user, or that account rather, is actually going off to Entra, is getting created with those exact permissions that we just requested a second ago. Now, as it completed, now we're going to go back and verify. We hear trust but verify, right? So as it completes, we're going to now pull up the user. This was, I believe, OpenAI 123. And as we pull it up, remember, this is an actual entity that's on Entra ID. And it's not just an entry, it's on Entra ID. If you've heard of app regs, they're used for modernization. These are the same type entities that are driving the permissions on those as well. Now, if you look at it, I'm going to actually bring up the correct MPE at this point. We're going to go down and select that OpenAI account right there. As we select it, we're now going to verify what the entitlement hierarchy is. And you'll see on the left, it's got two elements, and it's got exactly what we requested. And so that therefore, that actually confirms what we are thinking we intended to have, and we can have the confidence this thing to go out and do the actions as we intended. Now, just because everything's great now, doesn't mean it's going to be awesome later. We want to verify that awesomeness later. So what we're going to do is we're going to also have a certification process. We can also not only look at that account, but we can look at all the other accounts. So as we bring this up, we're going to basically look, this is just the MPEs, SPNs. So as we look at it, we're going to swap over and filter for the entitlement types. We're going to look at the permissions, and then once we do that, we're going to see all the permissions in the left, or on that column to the right, and we got the counts on the left. So this now gives us a very easy and quick way to see the level of risk we have. For those cases, maybe the exercise is done. John Smith was doing that exercise for 2 weeks at Alpha Gamma. Exercise is done, and you know what, this access shouldn't be out there, right? But at least this way you can know, and you can take appropriate action. Now, I will say in just a minute that everything you saw there in that demo, I'll be making available on a website you can get to with a QR code and a short link. But this is just kind of a wrapping some things up, and just to kind of say that, hey, you may be thinking, this is all awesome, what do I do next, right? And so the great thing is, you're already here. So first step, check, done, you're good. The second step, very close. There are a variety of ways for the next step. It could be popping by our booth, asking more questions, but it basically is certainly becoming more enabled, kind of getting some more knowledge, right? And then really the next step is becoming pilot ready. I kind of describe that as thinking about what are those use cases. What's really fascinating to me and some of our team members is, there's so many different use cases, and really these tools can be applied to many of these. So we're just really kind of understand your use cases and what's going to drive things. And the last thing I give you a tip is also just encouragement is, be prepared to be iterative. Just because it doesn't work the first time. Frederick Brooks, kind of going back in time, 1975, he said, plan to throw one away, you will anyway, right? So, think through that and plan it that way, and you should have great success. So thank you again. I think we're coming to the close. We might have one. Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of minutes for questions, but I will tell you, we're at booth 730. There's a QR code. There's also a short link. Feel free to take a picture and grab the link at the bottom if you'd like. And we'd be happy to take questions as we go out the door, because I think we're about hit our 20-minute mark. So thank you, everyone, for being here. My name's Andrew Welchel, and hope to see you soon. Thank you. Oh, yeah, you should get CPEs for this if you want to submit it independently. Oh, let me put that there. I'll just leave this like it is.